We Saw a Thing is a movie podcast about remakes and sequels.
We saw a thing and talked about it.
This week, the guys watch Dracula.
The following conversation has been edited for brevity.
Neither of these movies did anything for me, so I'm curious what you have to say for them, because, I don't have strong opinions about these movies. They kind of just washed over me, and I feel like it's just time I'm not going to be able to get back now. So I really want to know what you thought.
All right, so I like monsters. I'm a big fan of the Universal monsters, but Dracula was not ever one that I was particularly interested in. In the reincarnations, I still have never got the appeal. I've never had the affinity for Dracula. With that said, I have seen both of these films before. Let's talk about the 1931 Dracula because it did so much for Universal, and then it sparked basically what everybody was going to mimic vampires as for the rest of forever. This is a shitty movie.
Yeah, it is. Nobody blinks in this movie, Jay. It's so weird.
Because everybody's a vampire.
Is that what it is? Is that what it is?
The hypnotic eye thing is a vampire thing. So when their eyes are glued to the guy, they're doing their vampire blood stares.
It was just very strange. Nobody's hands really moved. Everyone just sort of stood still for the most part. Nobody blinked ever at all in that entire movie. I found it very disconcerting, but I did really like the sets. The sets were amazing.
And they had to be. It's 1930, right? So you have to build absolutely everything that you're going to see for the most part. And this was a ripoff of a stage play, and some of the players in that stage play are in the film. So everything is so theatrical. It's just not very good. That is not to say that movies from the 1930s aren't good. I adore Frankenstein, and I love Creature from the Black Lagoon that shows up a bunch of years later. I haven't seen The Mummy. I haven't seen The Invisible Man. I had seen Dracula before. I did not remember being so displeased with the film because nothing about it is scary. Dracula is almost welcoming to everyone. He's not a villain in this movie, but he is a villain. You know, the best description I can give this movie, Dracula, 1931. Just watch some stuff happen for a while. And now you may think that is what happens with every movie, but no, because there's no huge triumphant defeat of Dracula. One, it happens off screen. Two, the ending of the movie is people walking up a staircase. This is literally just shit happens. At one point, and God love them, at one point you see the string on the rubber bat. It's just they're trying so hard, and I appreciate it. But even then, there were so many better films. And of course, this was a pop culture huge thing for Universal Monsters. There were more Dracula movies. It started the iconic vampire thing. And, it's fun to watch Bela Lugosi with "Listen, the children of the night." It's fun.
It's so campy.
But this is a bad movie.
The way that you're talking about these Universal monster movies, though, should we do more of those? Because I'd be down to do more.
I think we should.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should.
All right.
And genuinely, the other ones I've seen, I've really enjoyed.
Okay.
And it also could be me. I may just not be a vampire guy. I definitely like werewolves more than vampires.
Then what's the problem? Because at one point, Dracula was a werewolf in this movie. In both movies, really.
In both movies, he turned into a wolf at parts.
Stupid movies.
Not that you got to see it in the 1930s version. It was just something that happened.
I was shocked when the movie finished to see that it's only an hour and 15 minutes long. That felt like the longest movie I've ever seen.
I'm sorry to fans. Obviously, there are fans for this film. People love the Universal monsters, but this is not a good revisit. You've listened to the podcast up to this point. We have no problem with older movies. We have no problem with black and white. It's just a bad film. And I'm sorry to say it. And then jump forward to 1992. And I know I'm taking up a lot of our audio waves right now, but jump forward, 1992, and a little guy named Francis Ford Coppola decides to throw his hat in the ring. And dude, Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992 fascinates me. Who is this movie for?
I don't know. Now, that's my new question for you, is that I looked back over Francis Ford Coppola's directorial career. This is the only movie of his that I've seen.
What?
Yeah, I know. I was a little bit shocked too.
What?
I know.
How have you not seen The Godfather?
I haven't seen The Godfather. What do you want from me?
I want you to go and see The Godfather.
This movie feels like Guillermo del Toro. It feels like Terry Gilliam. It feels like Dark City. It feels very early 90s, massive soundstage sets. It's got a very distinctive, Terry Gilliam look to it, though. It surprised me that Francis Ford Coppola was the director, but then I thought maybe it shouldn't surprise me because I haven't seen anything else he's done. So is this typical for him as an entry point to Francis Ford Coppola? Should my reaction to this movie make me want to see other things or ignore this one and see other things that he's done? I'm at a loss here, man.
This movie is weird because it is too horny for children. Plus that R rating.
It's so horny. And then I watched a behind the scenes featurette, and Francis Ford Coppola used to read the novelization of this story to 9-year-old children. He says it in a behind the scenes feature for the movie. Oh yeah, it was one of my favorite books to read 9-year-old children, so I've always wanted to make it into a movie. That blew my mind. If his retelling of it is accurate to actual Bram Stoker's Dracula, what are you reading that horny bullshit to 9-year-olds for?
Look, the book is not this horny.
Okay, good to know. Good to know.
The book is just a series of diary notes and letters. It doesn't go into graphic detail about Lucy going at it with a werewolf.
That was batshit. She got eaten by a werewolf, and in the next scene, it's an open casket, and she is fine.
Oh, yeah.
This movie makes no goddamn sense.
Like I said, it is way too horny for kids, and it's R-rated.
Yeah, as it should be.
And it tries so hard to actually keep serious in tone, but then it is campy as shit. So adults really can't take this seriously either. But so the only thing I'm thinking is maybe 20 something college kids who are super into horror and felt oh, this is dark literature and it looks so rad, man. Maybe it's for them, but it also feels like a play, but moves as only a film could move. This is what I mean. It is fascinating.
The aesthetic of this movie is really interesting. The costume design is ridiculous and amazing. The sets are huge. And I read that the whole movie was filmed on a soundstage, which did not surprise me at all because the sets are just ridiculous. So much attention was paid to the aesthetic, that sequence where Keanu Reeves is shaving in Count Dracula's castle, and then Dracula comes in to start helping him shave, and the walls all start moving in behind them. There were so many neat moments like that aesthetically. The big war sequence at the beginning, or when Keanu Reeves is on the train and everything goes red and black. And visually, there was a lot of really cool stuff going on. And a lot of the effects are really interesting and would have been super hard to pull off because they clearly did a ton of them in camera. And for early 90s, they wouldn't have had the ability to pop it in a computer and smooth it out at all. They would have just had to trial and error that bitch until they got it right. And that would have taken forever and been super difficult, but some of that stuff really holds up. And so for all the attention that's paid to making it look cool and all the interesting ideas for the camera tricks that they played during the movie, why not cast people who can hold on to an accent for an entire scene? Anthony Hopkins is goddamn terrible in this movie. Keanu Reeves is worse.
I knew you'd bring up the accents because you've done this before. You've brought this up before. As soon as I heard Keanu, I'm like, oh shit. I know Chris is going to bring up the accents because this guy's going to drop this shit all over the place. And then Anthony Hopkins did it, I'm like, oh, he's gonna talk about Anthony Hopkins as well. Look, you know me, that stuff doesn't bug me.
I know it doesn't bug you, but Cary Elwes and Gary Oldman deserve to be in better movies. Cary Elwes had nothing to do, but he really seemed like he was putting an effort in. Nobody else seemed to be putting an effort in. Like, how does Anthony Hopkins go from Silence of the Lambs, literally the year before, to this hot, atrocious garbage? Makes absolutely no goddamn sense to me. Everyone else just looked like they were putting in time. Like, this is why I don't understand the Francis Ford Coppola thing, because it really sounds like, to me, especially when you look at things like The Godfather, which is supposed to have brilliant acting in it, why was he so focused on the aesthetic and had absolutely no time for the acting? Like, it just seemed like the acting was such an afterthought here.
I think everyone just thought the costumes and the sets would take care of anything they were trying to do as actual actors a little bit. I think Gary Oldman's really working at something. I don't know what he's working at. He really wants you to sympathize with him, but Dracula is an absolute grotesque monster in this movie.
This was a weird watch, dude.
This film is an Oscar winner.
Yeah, but for things that make sense. Like, it won an Oscar for, like, costumes.
Yeah, and makeup, which again makes sense.
The makeup was really cool.
That werewolf and that man bat didn't happen by accident.
And a lot of those practical effects really hold up.
Sound editing, I don't know what it was up against. I haven't gone that far a deep dive. But the sound effects editing was one that caught my eye. And then best effects, which is fair. Like 1992, there is a lot of practical and a lot of other worldly looking effects at play here. There's a lot of matting. There's a lot of transparent skies so that your eyeballs can show through it. Like, there's a lot going on.
There was also some really cool stuff early in the film with playing with Dracula's shadow, where his shadow was interacting with things, or
his shadow, and that's all got to be digital before digital happened, right? Like,
my understanding is that's all practical effects. So I don't know how the hell they did that, but it looked awesome.
It must have been animation then.
And it was a really cool idea. Like, there was a ton of really cool ideas in this movie.
Oh, I agree. I think that it's an interesting film to watch, but that does not make it a good film.
No.
To me.
No.
It's not trying to replace the Bela Lugosi versions.
No.
That the original is based on this material. You know, it's not trying to replace that because Lugosi didn't have the blood and it reached wide audiences because anytime someone got bit, it was off screen and really ridiculously ridiculous. And, this is why we need a time machine. So that we can take audiences from the 1930s who are obsessed with Dracula and say, all right, we're going to show you a vampire movie in 2000 and in 2005 and then in 2010. And you can watch the stupid Netflix Dracula series. We know how a better story can be told. Dracula was not ready for film, I think. But I know this movie has its fans. But this movie is all over the place weird.
Dude, it has almost an 8 out of 10 on IMDb as far as user ratings go. It's definitely got its fans, and I don't get it.
Well, I mean, on Letterboxd, it's at a 3.5. So that even to me is a lot. And I understand putting this on is something that gives you an atmosphere, or maybe it's like, I wanted something monstrous and I put this on. But this cannot be someone's like favorite movie. Because this movie is nuts. Like, let's actually talk about what happens in these movies. For someone who's never read the book, for someone who's never seen them, this is about a man going to Transylvania in both films, even though adapted from the book, different men, going to Transylvania to, like, finalize some property in London for this guy who lives in a castle that is terrifying. And he moves to London to set up shop, but he's also ancient and a vampire, and he's going to eat some women and turn some women. And there's this professor who is this doctor, but also vampire hunter? Sure. He's like a psychiatrist or a guy who knows things about the medical world, but also a vampire hunter. And that's where we get Van Helsing. And Van Helsing's like, but no, it's a vampire, so we gotta kill the vampire. And in both movies, Van Helsing kills the vampire. Does and doesn't, because the additions that are not in the book, for the most part, the original plays out okay to the book. But it's not Renfield, I don't think it originally. I think it's Jonathan Harker originally in the book who goes out to see Dracula. Dracula gets fixated on Mina, Jonathan Harker's fiance, and, he bites her. She loves him now. They have to kill Dracula so that they can free Mina. That's basically what happens. In the 1992 version, there's a big addition that runs the gamut of the film, and that is there was a love interest for Dracula, and Winona Ryder looks exactly like that love interest. So now he's gonna really skeeve on her. Take her out proper dates, let her pet a wolf, and, he's gonna hit on her in the street, so that they can get acquainted. And I gotta say, it's so stupid. But I guess it makes sense in a way, but it's this ridiculous thing that is trying desperately for you to sympathize with him. And if you did, congratulations.
Yeah, if you did, you took a leap I couldn't take.
I did not.
Yeah.
That is a leap I could not take at all. He is full on hypnotizing her and biting her and making her want him through sexual assault, man.
Yeah.
And it is weird.
Yeah.
And then she chops off his head. The end.
All of those weird emotional character turns between him and her were really strange. There's this sequence in the bed where the rest of them are in his house, looking to kill him, and he's with her in bed talking about turning her into a vampire. And then, as she's sucking his blood, he has a change of heart. And he's like, no, I love you too much to be condemned like this. And then she changes his mind. She regrets it. And then all of a sudden, they're on the road and she's evil and attacking Van Helsing. And then all of a sudden, they're at Count Dracula's palace, and she cuts his head off because she has a vision from God about how to end this. It
doesn't matter because they totally got to pork. That's all that scene was oh my God, I'm so in love with you. And then bat creature.
Okay, so he has his 3 brides who are molesting Keanu Reeves for most of the movie.
Oh, Keanu had it rough.
Yeah, he had it so rough his hair was gray for no goddamn reason by the end of the movie.
Oh, that's right. Oh my God, I forgot. It's he had all his blood sucked so bad that his hair went gray.
Yeah, exactly.
And remember that scene where they're seated with Van Helsing and Van Helsing's just eating a maniac at dinner? And he's just so what do we do? Oh, we're going to just ram a stake through his cut off his head. Do
you remember the scene where they're talking about they're going to go and they're going to kill Dracula? And Van Helsing comes over to the house and says, oh, you got to protect Winona Ryder because she's the concubine of the devil, and starts humping that guy's leg for no reason.
Oh, my God. We haven't even talked about Renfield eating every level of bug in this film. There's a psychiatric ward on the property that Dracula buys.
Yeah, across the street or whatever.
Across the street. And Renfield, who is just in love with eating all kinds of bugs. What? He all of a sudden wants to protect Mina. Although, I guess he gives up the location. Because that green mist of Dracula just floats right into her sheets. It's the most suggestive movie ever. And then it doesn't need to be suggestive because you also have a scene where a werewolf is banging a lady.
It's there's some scenes where they're we got to have the sensual reveal. And then there's, you say, other scenes where it's just a wolf banging a chick. It's just... I don't understand. And it's almost as if Lucy is almost set up so that we don't feel bad for her in those moments because she's so suggestive.
She She hasn't picked a man.
Yeah, she's Captain Promiscuity in the 1800s to start this movie. And so we're not supposed to feel bad that she's got her boobs out for the rest of the movie for no reason other than to just have boobs on the screen.
At all. Just breasts out. And you know what's great is that the audience, that our audience who's like 18 years old, they're like, I gotta watch this movie. And it makes no sense. Oh, God. This freaking movie.
Dude, you know what was the best thing that I learned about this movie after watching it?
You go for it.
This is my favorite thing. Okay, Winona Ryder and Keanu Reeves get married in Romania.
Right.
They had to reshoot that sequence because there's some confusion about maybe they were a little bit too close to reality and they may have actually been married in real life on the set of the movie because they followed Romanian marriage traditions so closely.
But it's literally less than a minute scene. How could it be that close?
Like, that's insane!
And while they're getting married, it's like, at the same time, Lucy is getting her head chopped off and getting a stake driven through her after she stole a child.
Yeah, after she just, like, steals a random baby?
Because she's full-on vampire now.
What is happening?
She's walking down. They're, like, at her coffin, ready to chop off her head and, like, drive a stake through her. And she walks down the stairs. So they hide. They hide from the vampire so they can get the jump on her. And she's coming down the stairs with a crying child.
Oh, that was so weird.
Super creepy. Like, obviously this was like her, like, bedtime snack. And they, like, spring on her hard and, like, grab that child, and the child's off to the side. And it's like, okay, it's go time. And the cross works on her, so that's great. Boom, stake through the heart, head chopped off. While Keanu and Winona are saying I do.
Dude, the moments where the vampires get attacked by people were so anticlimactic because the whole movie is this buildup of how powerful they are. Dracula's got his face in the sky in the clouds during a storm, and it leads to Winona Ryder and her best friend making out in a maze somewhere that's never acknowledged.
Right. I forgot that they made out in a maze.
He has the power to, like, change weather. He can be mist. He can be a wolf. He can be a bat. He can be a Batman hanging from the ceiling. He can do all of this crazy stuff.
He can control the wind. We saw a scene where he can control the wind. Not to mention, apparently his shadow could have, like, choked out Keanu at one point.
Yeah, so you have to imagine that Lucy has at least some of these same abilities when she becomes a full-fledged vampire, and they, like, pull out a little cross, and she crawls back into her coffin, and then just gives up.
Like, full gives up.
There's no fight, and there's no fight to Dracula either. Like, they don't stake him, so I'm not sure how he's dying. Like, they shot him a bunch, which we've been told doesn't work. And then they stabbed him in the chest with a sword, which we've also been told doesn't work.
Yeah, that shouldn't work. That should not work.
Yeah, and then they cut his throat with a sword, which also shouldn't work, but now he's dying.
You're right. Let's establish the Dracula rules. There are no rules. He's Dracula. If he, like, gravity? Pfft, gravity. Yeah. He will crawl down his castle side if he wants to. Face first.
Not even subtle about it. Makes eye contact with Keanu Reeves, who just stands there and does nothing, like it's totally fine and normal.
Doesn't he, like, do a lizard tongue at that point, too? Like, blah, blah, and then, like, down he goes.
Down he goes.
It's amazing how many things happen in this movie. In the original, Dracula is driving the coach, picks up Renfield. They take off in the coach, but it's 100% Dracula at the wheel because when he sticks his head out the window to, like, ask the driver something, there's a bat steering the horses, I guess.
Sure.
It's really like the original, there is a lot of bats.
Yes.
But then when they get there, there's no driver. And Count Dracula is there to welcome him. I bid you welcome. He sifts himself through the world's largest cobweb, and and he's magic. Like, he is magic. But at no point is he really that big a threat in the original. In the remake, the whole time you feel threatened by him. But every time a person recognizes he's a vampire, he just pisses off.
Yeah.
I mean, he's supposed to be this warrior in the 92 version who like slaughtered so many Turks. He's menacing looking. He screams at Harker when they talk about religion for a hot second.
Yeah.
Basically, he becomes your like drunk uncle on Thanksgiving when you bring up Trump and he's a Trump supporter.
Wow.
He just immediately like loses his shit on Jonathan and then like recoils. Because at that point, I'd be like, yeah, I guess I'm going to stay somewhere else. This place you're weird, man.
But no.
But he doesn't even just like scream. He grabs a sword. Your drunk uncle screaming at like Trump is great with the sword. You'd get out of that dinner. You'd be like, cool. I don't need seconds. I'm out.
Thanks for your hospitality. I'll be seeing myself out.
Exactly. Oh, by the way, creepy shadow, please don't follow me. Obviously, if you're under 18 and looking for something to watch that has a lot of breasts, I think this is for you. I don't know who this is for.
I don't know.
It really like, you can't take it seriously, even though it really wants you to.
It is the most dramatic thing I've ever seen.
But it's so campy at the same time. I feel like we've done these movies no justice.
Well, I don't know that they deserve much justice, let's be honest. But also, I really think that there is a section of like auteur directors who are brilliant and everyone thinks are brilliant, who go off and do their passion project, and it's always disappointing. And maybe this is just another example of that.
Like, yo, Coppola, you need to be taken down a peg or two. Here's Dracula.
Yeah, yes, exactly. It's like Mother and Noah. Those are examples of, directors who are great doing their passion projects and just kind of whiffing. Just whiffing. Maybe Dracula is Francis Ford Coppola's whiffing.
I wonder what Spielberg's whiff is. Like, he's got one. I know he's got one. But I'm trying to think right now, and it doesn't automatically come to mind. It must be Ready Player One.
It's got to be.
But I don't think that's his passion.
I mean, maybe AI, because that wasn't really like meant to be his. But then that's like a really good movie. So I don't know.
AI, well, that's the thing, right? Like maybe. Okay, let's consider the BFG. It's a children's film that he wanted to make that I genuinely wanted to see, and I thought, big whiff. And it's a Roald Dahl classic.
And if we're talking about like recent stuff, it certainly sounds like Chris Nolan's Tenet. Like apparently he's been working on that for like 10 years, and it's certainly not been as well received as most of his other movies.
That's a good point. Yep. I mean, I've read what it's about, and I'm not excited about it anymore. Because to me, it sounds like the kind of movie that really believes it's intelligent and goes a long distance to prove it. But at the end, you're like, okay, I don't know if I get it. And everybody will be like, oh, you're so dumb for not getting it. That to me already is like, I don't want to get involved with your movie.
I still haven't seen it because, global pandemic and being locked in a theater with people sounds like my personal hell. But,
So maybe this was just Francis Ford Coppola's like obviously, I know you've heard of The Godfather.
Yeah, obviously.
Francis Ford Coppola's Godfathers are great films. Apocalypse Now, The Rainmaker, I really enjoy The Rainmaker. But he also did like Jack, and Jack is not good with Robin Williams. You never saw that?
No. Literally, dude, I scrolled through his entire director credits on IMDb, and this is the only one I've seen.
Oh, man. Now I'm like looking through his filmography, and I haven't seen as many as I expected. Every director is going to have their BFG, so this is his. But I don't want to like poo-poo on Dracula for people who love Dracula, because you can love Dracula. I don't have to understand it. I'm not a huge vampire guy anyway, even though Buffy the Vampire Slayer is my favorite show of all time. But there's more than just vampires happening in that show.
Yeah, for sure. And that show, I'm trying to think of examples, but Buffy's certainly one of them. Like, I'm not a big horror person, but to me, I enjoy that series because of the dialogue. I really enjoy the way that the characters interact with each other. I enjoy the way that they speak to one another. They use really interesting grammar on that show. That was the thing that got me. The rest of it's just kind of peripheral. So there's always opportunities for me to be drawn into a story that I, on paper, shouldn't enjoy. I mean, last episode is a prime example of that. On paper, Pride and Prejudice isn't necessarily something you and I would seek out to watch. And yet, look how much we loved that. I'm always open to enjoying something that's a bit outside of, like, my comfort zone as far as what I am attracted to right away. And certainly with this podcast, I'm learning to be more open-minded when I hit play on something, because I can't come into something with preconceived notions. I have to just sort of ingest it for what it is. And so I really did try to do that with Dracula, because, like, horror is not my bag. You know that. It's not something I seek out. It's not something I enjoy. But every time we watch a horror movie for this podcast, I'm left at the end going, if that's what horror is, then my reasons for not seeking those out have changed. Because initially it was, well, I don't like that feeling of being scared, so why would I watch a horror movie? And now, having a few under my belt, my reason for not seeking them out is that I just purely don't enjoy them.
Yeah, and that's totally fair. Like, I don't think we've watched a movie that has been so horrifying that it even has scared you.
No.
But I know going into it, you also have a thing where you're like, I think this movie's going to try to give me that feeling.
Village of the Damned, I found, especially the original, not the remake, I found really creepy because of the kind of story it was. Like, it was the idea of something invisible taking over that town. That was like a really disturbing premise. I think that gets me more than, like, the, oh, well, he's a monster. Like, I don't think that stuff gets me quite the same way as, like, that base idea of, wow, that's a really horrifying thought.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, when I look at, like, some of my favorite horror films of all time, they're not, there's monsters in them, but they may not be the kind of monsters that are able to be seen, really. Like, they're like demon movies, or The Exorcist is one of my favorites of all time. Halloween is about a serial killer, like a slasher movie. So when we get to these gothic monsters like Dracula, I tend to like the more modernized stuff versus the gothic, like From Dusk Till Dawn or Blade. I enjoyed the new remake of Fright Night and a little bit of the original. The Lost Boys. Like, these are all like modern takes. I don't necessarily go with the Draculas and the Interview with the Vampires and that gothic level of these creatures. I want to see how they take in I'm okay with Underworld.
Those are campy.
It's not like the greatest thing I ever saw.
It's the same thing with, like, Resident Evil. Those movies are just silliness.
But when it comes to, like, a werewolf, like, we can stay in the olden days and be on a moor. Like, I'm down with that. But I think Dracula is just too gothic a story for me and my liking personally.
There's got to be a retelling of that story that we would both enjoy. Clearly, neither of these were it. But I think that there's nuggets in there. Like, certainly, I enjoyed the aesthetic of the 90s version. Well, enjoyed might be a strong way to put that. I thought it was interesting. It constantly reminded me of Tim Burton and Terry Gilliam and Guillermo del Toro. Like, it made me want to watch Pan's Labyrinth. It made me want to watch 12 Monkeys. It made me want to, like, dig into some of those other movies that have, like, that same kind of aesthetic, but are just better films.
Yeah. Or, you know, we pop on Hotel Transylvania and we enjoy the shit out of that.
Well, I mean, I'm totally down to try a few more of these Universal monster movies. Like, I haven't seen any of them.
Absolutely. And I think because this is our Halloween episode, I'm hoping maybe I can persuade the producer to put in a little cheesy, like, lightning and ow effects. Maybe somewhere in here, maybe as we're leaving, like right now you would hear, like, you know, a crack of lightning. And then ow, and maybe some screeching bats. Sure. I don't know who produces this show, but maybe that'll happen. All right, that's good.
Next time on We Saw a Thing.
2 weeks from today, we're talking The Witches because they remade The Witches for HBO Max because that platform needs to be full of content before we get a full 24 episodes of Zack Snyder's Justice League in the new year. Because I'm sure that making it longer was the missing ingredient to making it good. Sorry, yes, The Witches, 2 weeks.
We Saw a Thing is hosted by Jay Kennedy and Chris Shapcott. Produced by Shapcuts Media. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And check our show notes for links to our social media and credits. And leave a review on Apple Podcasts.